Okay, do you hear me? Jean-Jacques Dordain speaking. Okay, so can I start my remarks?
Well, thank you. And let me just say a couple of things that we would be particularly interested in hearing, and we'd welcome whatever you care to say to us. We'd be very interested, I think, in your view of the utility of the ISS beyond 2016. We'd be, I think, also very interested in your thoughts of what international programs might go beyond the ISS into the future. We'd certainly welcome any comments you have on future international relationships and on some of the lessons we've learned from our partnerships to date. So with that, let me turn to you, and again, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Okay, no, thank you from my side. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to make a contribution to your committee. Just to start by saying that this hearing is very timely, since for the first time in the history of the International Space Station, we have a crew of 6 on board, made of 5 different nationalities, meaning that each international partner is today represented in orbit. So we are represented in orbit not only with hardware, but also with astronauts living and working together in orbit, as we are working together on ground since 20 years. So this is just a fact which should inspire our reflections. There is not anymore, for any of the 5 partners, a separate human spaceflight program. We have all together one human spaceflight program shared among 5 partners. Obviously, ESA cannot have a separate human spaceflight program because we are dependent on other partners, in particular for transportation. But it's interesting to see that NASA and Russia could have a separate human spaceflight program, and they have not. They have just a contribution, a significant contribution, but to a joint human spaceflight program. And this is the reason why I am attaching a great importance to the hearing of today, because your conclusions may have an impact on our own plans, but also, I hope, our inputs might have an impact on your conclusions. So I would like to thank Mike O'Brien to have sent me 4 questions that you have recalled, 4 questions of interest for you, and I shall start by answering your questions. It being understood that I am ready to answer any further question you may have, either today or at a later stage, if it is necessary. So I have not prepared a presentation of the European Space Agency, its programs and activities. However, I would like to underline 3 characteristics of ESA, which could explain a lot what I shall say when I am answering your questions. So the first characteristic of ESA is that today ESA is 18 member states, which according to the ESA Convention pool their resources for developing space systems for both science and applications to the citizens. This means that the overall ESA activities range from science of the solar system and the universe, science of the Earth and its environment, life science, physical science, to operational meteorology, operational services for environment and security, operational navigation systems with Galileo, without forgetting, obviously, our activities related to the guarantee of access to space, and the development on competitive technologies, in particular for telecommunications. So as a result of that, and this is the first characteristic of ESA, human spaceflight activities in ESA represent less than 15%, 15%, of the total ESA activities. And member states will never decide to increase their contribution to human spaceflight activities to the detriment of science and services to the citizens. And I shall come back to that. The second characteristic of ESA is that this balance between different types of activities, what I have called science, applications, innovation, launchers, human space flights, is organized and even protected by the fact that there is not one ESA program and one ESA budget, but as many programs as type of activities. And each development program is subject to one legal decision through which the member states participating to that program are committed up to completion of that program within the limit of 120% of the initial budget. So this process that I have described makes decisions at ESA difficult, but on the other hand, it provides a fantastic solidity in each decision. Meaning that I dare to say that ESA is certainly the most reliable partner in the world because our member states are committed up to completion of any program. The third characteristic that I would like to underline is that if there is one topic on which ESA can teach the world, it is about international cooperation. International cooperation is our daily life. It's 18 countries of Europe working together every day within ESA, but also cooperating with almost all space powers in the world, starting obviously with NASA, because ESA has started under our cooperation with NASA, so we don't know what means working without NASA. So NASA has always been a partner of ESA, and we are working with NASA more and more, not only on the space station, but also in science, in environment, and a lot of different subjects. With also Canada, with a very special place for Canada, because Canada is both an international partner, but also not a member of ESA, but I would say a cousin of ESA, Canada having the right to contribute to some ESA programs. But we are cooperating also with Russia, with Japan, with India, with China. So we know how much cooperation is difficult. And I can tell you that as a Director General, I appreciate that every day, that cooperation is difficult. But I can report that cooperation is also successful. My usual mantra is to say that it's always easier not to cooperate, but always more difficult to succeed alone. So this is with this background, and I am sorry to have spent 5 minutes on ESA, but I wanted that you appreciate this background to tell you how I am answering to your questions. So now let's move to the fourth question. So your first question what has ESA learned from ISS partnership? So I am deeply convinced that the partnership is the most important asset of the International Space Station, which will live much longer than the hardware in orbit. The ISS partnership, I would call that an operational G5, I must say that every day we are hearing about G8, G20, G something. I consider that we are a G5 working every day together to reach common objectives. This is a very solid partnership because it has been built up through a long list of problems, technical problems, financial problems, political problems that we had to overcome together, and even tragedy, the worst being obviously the loss of Colombia, that we had to face together to reach a common objective, completing the assembly of the International Space Station and maintaining a permanent human presence in orbit. So ISS today is already a success. A technical, operational, and management success. A fantastic success based on partnership. The first lesson, and maybe the most important, the first lesson of this partnership, and I shall come back to that at the very end of my remarks. The first lesson of this partnership is the interest of keeping a partnership open to new partners. The partnership of the ISS has moved from the original 4 of the Space Station Freedom, United States, Canada, Japan, ESA, to 5 in '93, when the 4 partners, and I insist on that, the 4 partners, USA, Canada, Japan, and ESA, sent a collective invitation to Russia for joining the partnership. And I must say that 15 years later, we know that this was that decision which has saved the International Space Station after the Columbia tragedy. Without the Russian partner, we could not have sustained a human presence in orbit. So just to say that sometimes it's good to open the partnership. Now, and just because the partnership is so solid, we have to draw together the lessons learned coming from our common experience on board ISS. And in particular on what we could have done better to make sure that our future endeavors will be even better. And I must say that I think that I was the first one among the ISS heads of agency to propose to share the lessons learned. And the exercise is still ongoing. And this is the reason why today I would have preferred to give you the lessons learned shared by all partners, but the exercise is not yet completed. So I shall tell you which points must, in my view, be investigated for improvements. The first one, and this is obvious, there is a need for redundancy in key functions. In particular, transportation functions. We have seen that. When the shuttle has been grounded, we were all grounded because the space shuttle was a unique transportation system for our modules. I am not even speaking of the crew. But all the partners were grounded when the shuttle was grounded. And that is a very important lesson learned, meaning that I often hear about interdependency. Interdependency should not mean a lack of redundancy. So you can be interdependent, but we need to accommodate redundancies for the key functions. The second lesson learned that, on which I would like to make some progress is the need for full standardization. Because interdependency requires standardization of interface. We have made a lot of progress on board ISS about standardization, but we are not yet at full standardization. And this would help a lot to have a complete standardization of our interfaces. The number 3 and maybe it's because I was in charge of utilization of the space station 20 years ago. We need to balance the utilization, the assembly, and the maintenance activities in any big endeavor from the very start of the program. The choice which has been made, and maybe this was the only choice after the Columbia tragedy, but the choice which has been made to push back all utilization activities after the assembly complete is a big problem. Because we have postponed to the end the benefits. And we have even created a gap between the space station and the user communities, which had to wait for 10 years between the start of the assembly and the start of utilization. And that is a big problem that we have to solve. Users must be on board as soon as possible. So the evolution of partnership from freedom to International Space Station, as well as the sequence that I just described, assembly first, utilization second, has extended the program into a very long period. Too long, in my view. To the point that almost nobody was at the start, who were at the start of the space station are still at the end. Maybe I am the only one because I have started on the space station 25 years ago. But I look like a dinosaur now. But it's a too long period with no intermediate, concrete and visible milestones which could have focused the teams on shorter-term objectives and could have attracted the attention and interest of governments and public much earlier. And if I say that, it's because I am from a very lucky generation. I was 10 years old when Sputnik was launched, and 3 years later it was Gagarin. And in less than 9 years, United States put a man on the moon. So to have programs extending for 20 years is much too long. So we have to create intermediate milestones which are visible, concrete, which can focus the short-term attention. And this is the reason why I would say that the last improvement that we could bring for future endeavors is to associate the public from all partners to the program. I don't think today that the public is attached to the International Space Station. So this is my answer to the first question. Now, I would like to say that unfortunately you have not the typed version of my remarks, but you will get that tomorrow. I have written that this morning, so it's handwritten for the time being, but you will get a typed version, because I am not so sure that my French accent is fully understood in Washington, D.C. But okay, I am doing my best. So the second question is, what is the ESA's interest in continuing the ISS program and why? First of all, as I said above, the ISS program has been sequenced in 2 successive periods, the assembly and then the utilization. And we are just at the end of the first period. And the second period is just starting. And I must say that speaking of continuation of something when you are just starting the sequence, which is interesting, I must say that is for me somewhat strange. Because the ISS, as I said, the ISS is already a technical success. But it's not yet a success in terms of utilization. We have still to demonstrate that. And I think that failing to demonstrate that, I am not so sure that the overall assessment of the ISS would be a success. So This is the first reason why we have to continue ISS operations. Just because we have to reap the benefits of the investments made by utilizing extensively the resources on board. The ISS is a unique laboratory offering resources which cannot be found on Earth. And as for any laboratory, significant results are not coming within months, they are coming within years. So I think that for me the question is very simple. We know the cost. The cost of utilizing the ISS are well defined. We know how much it costs, which may be not the case for all laboratories. So it's already something which is good. So the only answer to the question, how long should we use the ISS as a laboratory, is, and this is always my answer, and this is what I have answered to Mike Griffin when we were discussing that. I always answered, as long as the benefits are worth the cost. And this is the reason why, as we are doing for any satellite, my position is the following. We have to organize every 3 years a joint assessment of the benefits of using the space station. And we have to jointly decide if, on the basis of such assessment, it is worthwhile to continue for another 4 to 5 years, because we need some margins. But to have that every 3 years, and to continue on the basis of the assessment of the benefit to cost, as long as, technically speaking, the space station can be used. And even, I would say that if the benefits are so worthwhile, we have already to think about a laboratory in low Earth orbit beyond the ISS, because I cannot tell the users today, you have to use a space station, but you better hurry up, because we shall close in 5 years from now. I am not so sure that this is the best way to attract the best scientists. So let's continue to use a space station as long as the benefits are worth the cost. So this is the first reason to continue. The second reason to continue ISS operations, and this is a totally different rationale. It is because the space station is part of the human exploration program. This is not disconnected, and I shall come back to that, from the human exploration program. The ISS is the place to test hardware, to test operations, I would say to test astronauts, before they are used in a lunar base, and even more on a Mars base. I must say that even the space station is more useful, in my view, to test the hardware for human exploration of Mars than for lunar exploration of Mars. Because, and moreover, there cannot, in my view, there cannot be any gap between ISS operations and the operations of a lunar base. Because this is the same people which will operate ISS on one side and the lunar base. And the expertise is always with people. If there is a gap, we shall lose the people, we shall lose the expertise. So we should not have any gap between ISS operations and lunar base operations. So in conclusion of that question, there are two rationales for continuing the ISS programs, exploitation. One related to utilization, one related to human exploration. And by the way, the two rationales can lead to different dates. And this is the reason why, in my view, we should not define any date but just a rationale. And we shall see. We shall decide when we need to decide. So I am going to the third question, which is how would you characterize the ESA obligation and that of the US to the ISS in terms of its operational life? So as I said above, it is more a question of rationale than a question of obligation. If we have a good rationale, I feel that this is an obligation. And if we have not a good rationale, I think that it would be stupid to continue. So I don't think that this is a matter of obligation, but more a matter of rationale. But since I am a good civil servant, I have looked at the agreement to see where were my obligations. So the obligations, they are defined in several agreements, the multilateral intergovernmental agreement at governmental level and in the bilateral MOUs at agency level. So the obligation of each partner is to maintain its own flight elements in order and to pay its share of common operation costs. Meaning that for ESA, we have to maintain the Columbus laboratory in order, and we have to pay 8.3% of the common operation cost. This is the obligation of ESA. And against such obligation, ESA has the right to use 8.3% of the resources on board. That it's a right, it's not an obligation. I can use or not that right. So this is the first aspect of the obligation. Second aspect, when you read the agreement, or at least I hope that I have not made any mistake, I have not found any termination date in the different agreements. Meaning that operational life continues as far as no decision is taken. But third, and that is an interesting point, each partner has the right to withdraw unilaterally at any time. And that I would like to say that there is a difference among the partners. Because if ESA withdrew, I think that the other partners could continue without ESA. But if NASA withdrew, I think that this is the end of the space station. So this makes a difference between at least NASA and ESA for the right to withdraw unilaterally. However, I don't think that a unilateral decision could happen. First, thanks to the solidity demonstrated in the partnership, I think that there is a real solidarity among the partners. Second, because the rationale is the same for all partners. If we have a good rationale, it should be applicable to all partners. So, the duration of operational life should rely on solid rationale and should be a joint decision by all partners. I would say that at the end, the only obligation of each partner is to match their budget with the objective, but this is true for any program, including for non-space programs. So this is not something which is a great statement. And I am coming to the last question. How does ISS and its extension past 2015 connect to the ESA's future plans for human and robotic exploration beyond low Earth orbit? So the future plans of ESA for human and robotic exploration will be defined in several steps. So they are not completely defined. This is very clear. The next step is in 2011. But the first step has been taken in November 2008 with important decisions taken by the member states. First of all, the member states, they have decided to embark into an ambitious program of robotic exploration of Mars. with the first mission, ExoMars, which is under detailed definition, with a target date of a launch in early 2016, and with an objective for ESA to demonstrate landing, moving at the surface of Mars, and drilling capabilities. And follow-on missions are already being prepared. We have a Mars robotic exploration preparatory program beyond ExoMars, just meaning that there is a long-term vision in our member states to have a continuous robotic exploration of Mars. So I must say that on this robotic exploration of Mars, we had extensive discussion with NASA. And we are close to an agreement for a long-term cooperation on robotic exploration of Mars. There is a meeting at the end of June planned for that. And according to the discussions, there could be a significant contribution of NASA to ExoMars and contributions to ESA to further NASA mission, exactly on the model of our fantastic success of Cassini-Huygens. Discussions with Russia are also going on, including an ESA contribution to the Russian Phobos Grunt mission. So this was the first part of plans taken by member states. For what concerns human exploration, the member states, they have just decided to start some preparatory activities to define a potential contribution of ESA to a human lunar exploration program. But it is clear that for human exploration, as I said already, number one, Europe is dependent upon other partners, and in particular United States, meaning that we cannot take decisions separately from your decisions. So obviously your plans are the starting point for any plans in Europe. But number two, and this has been recognized by all ministers, we need a high-level political decision in Europe for what concerns human exploration. Because any significant contribution of Europe to a human exploration program will require additional budget. Because human exploration will never be developed, as I said at the beginning, to the detriment of science and applications to the citizens. So we need additional money for human exploration, and for that we need a high-level political decision. This is not just business as usual for the Director General of the European Space Agency. And the first high-level political conference on the subject is already planned in October this year, to say that, okay, we are serious, at least in the reflections. But at the end, the most important connection between ISS duration of life, and future human exploration is the budget competition. Every 3 years, we shall have to decide where do we put the money to continue to exploit the space station or to make new developments for exploration. And the question is, can we afford to finance both ISS continuation and the development of future human exploration? And this is the reason why one important rationale to continue ISS, as I said, is to make it an integral part of the exploration program. At least to put that in the same rationale, instead of having a competition between the two. And this is the reason why, on our side, additional resources will be necessary to make the two. And also because, and that I am speaking as an engineer, You cannot replace operations by development or the other way around. It's totally different expertise, totally different industrial capabilities, and you cannot just stop exploitation and replace by development or the other way around. We are speaking of totally different industrial activities and expertise. So before closing my statement, Mr. Chairman, I would like to come back to a very important characteristic for a partnership to be sustainable. A partnership is sustainable only if it is open to new partners. And we, the 5 partners of the ISS, we must address an important question. Shall we invite other partners? And I would like to mention China, India, South Korea, because they are part of the reflection on the global exploration strategy. Shall we invite them to join our partnership under terms and conditions that we could jointly agree, exactly as we have done in '93 when we have invited Russia? It was under terms and conditions that Russia has accepted. So I don't want to anticipate the answer. This is not at all my point today. But my point today is that not raising the question among the 5 partners would be the worst option. So this is what I wanted to say, Mr. Chairman. As I said, I am sorry that you have not received a typed version of that remarks, but you will receive that as early as tomorrow. And I thank you for your attention. And again, I am more than ready to answer any other question today or at any time you would like to listen to me. But thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you so much for your candor and for sharing your thoughts with us, for sharing the benefits of your experience. We're very appreciative. And let me check at this point to see, is General Permanoff on the line anywhere? General, are you there?